It's a voice rarely heard, the voice of a formerly enslaved person. Few know that in the decades following emancipation, interviews were done in an effort to preserve their stories. And in tonight's Prime Focus, you'll hear some of what they said as part of our partnership with the 10 Million Names Project. ABC's Alex Brachet brings us their stories in their words.
I want you to tell me how you got your name.
I got my name from President Jeff Davis, the president of the Southern Confederation. He owned my grandfather and my father. My grandfather was a blacksmith, and my father had learned how to write a little bit in Richmond, Virginia before he brought him down there.
That's crazy because you can hear it in his voice, man. He sounds so Southern, and you can tell that they didn't really have that much of speaking skills back then, but his English pretty good, man. I can really hear him, and he was named by a president. It's crazy how we were named, and he said, he owned my father, my grandfather owned.
You're listening to the voice of a formerly enslaved American, a man by the name of George Johnson. This rare and historic audio interview was recorded in 1941, almost 80 years after Mr. Johnson gained his freedom. He and his family worked on a plantation in Virginia owned by Confederate leader Jefferson Davis, a staunch opponent of abolition. In the interview, Johnson recalls a day in the life as an enslaved person.
Did they drive the slaves down there in Davis's Bend very hard, or did they?
Man, that's crazy. Look at that image. Look at what they had to go through from sun up to sundown. Sun up to sundown. And yeah, look at the sack. So you can tell they're picking cotton. That's cotton right there. And this is in the Library of Congress in Fisk, University of Mississippi Delta collection.
Work them reasonable.
Reasonable. You know, Martin Jr. gave myself another boy. And boy was chopping cotton. Boy didn't chip with the gang, you understand? He would come to hook the boy chip, you understand? That's the house of Martin Jr. boy. And that's what's the trouble, son. Said, Mr. One hook me, because I would chip with the gang.
Audio tape interviews like this are striking and uncommon, but are actually part of a long legacy of Black families, communities, and institutions, including historically Black colleges and universities, that lead the way in collecting and preserving the oral histories of the formerly enslaved people in the 19th and 20th centuries. In the 1930s and beyond, technology allowed some of these interviews to be recorded as part of both federal and independent projects.
Man, look at our people, man. Look at how far we came. Look at our beautiful people, man. Look at this image. They don't look like they were suffering. You know why? Because they endured. They overcame. They were strong people. Beautiful people.
The details are often difficult to hear, but they remind us this history happened not too long ago, with names, faces, and stories.
And they got little kids picking cotton. So they wasn't lying about that. They didn't care. If you can walk and pick up stuff, they don't care how old you is. You going out there and work.
Do we know roughly how many of these recordings exist?
The recordings are relatively rare, but the recordings come from a much larger and really important and in many ways unsung collecting effort that took place. In terms of audio technology, most of it was not recorded by audio because the technology didn't exist, or at least in any kind of widespread accessible way when most of those were conducted. So it's really just a handful of audio recordings we have.
In 1974, a woman named Celia Black, at the age of 114 years old and shortly before her death, recalled picking cotton in Texas as a child born into slavery.
I didn't have to pick cotton or nothing.
I didn't do nothing but work in the field. Worked in the field, oh goodness. Made my husband go out west and pick cotton. Pick cotton.
All they did was pick cotton. That was their main objective every day, was to pick cotton. And you can hear it in our voice, man. That's years of work, years of, abuse. You can hear it in her voice.
Go out west every year. We went this year going out there picking cotton.
One of the things that kind of struck me, that you have an interview recorded in 1974. For some Black Americans, I mean, they're one generation removed from slavery.
In some ways, we think of slavery as ancient history. We think of it as something that happened a very long time ago to people we couldn't possibly have known.
And that's what they say a lot. They always say slavery always a long time ago. It wasn't really a long time ago. They always say, oh, it's in the past. Nah, and the truth is in the past. That's the problem. They always mad at us for trying to wake each other up. But what's wrong with us trying to find who we really are?
I was 6, 7 years old in 1974. So it was kind of amazing that we were alive at the same time. I was alive at the same time who was someone who had been born enslaved.
Alex Haley's Roots premiered on ABC just 3 years after this interview with Celia Black.
What's your name? Kunta Kinte.
If you don't remember this movie, look it up. The Roots. It was powerful because that was one of the aspects in slavery, making us forget who we are, forgetting our names, forgetting where we came from.
Alex Haley came into his work, Roots, what became Roots really, through his grandmother's stories. So we're really talking about oftentimes great-grandparents at this point in the 70s.
Dr. Kendra Field, chief historian of the 10 Million Names Project, and Harvard professor Vincent Brown explained how these recordings illustrate an enormous preservation effort. The firsthand accounts shedding light on the darkest chapters in our American history, yet also revealing incredible African-American strength and survival.
Didn't you have some entertainment, doing any dancing or anything?
Oh, I used to dance, but I don't do it now. No, I don't dance now. I try my best to serve my master. I'm trying my best to serve my Heavenly Father.
You hear these recordings. What were the emotions when you hear, the recollections of a Celia Black?
Did you hear what she said? She tried her best to serve her master. She tried her best to serve her Heavenly Father. It's crazy how that she put those two together. And, a lot of times they say, in slavery, we were given the Bible to control us. And the way she just said, hey, I do the best for my master and my Heavenly Father. Is she, conjoining the two, making the two one?
First is just the miracle of her survival. It's just that I'm actually hearing this person who had been enslaved. That's kind of a miracle.
Celia Black was alive when Abraham Lincoln was president and lived to see the resignation of President Richard Nixon.
Oh, man.
You remember Abraham Lincoln, President?
Oh, well, they gave him a good name. Oh, Abraham Lincoln. They thought Abraham was they thought everybody thought Abraham was the best president there was.
In a similar effort to preserve this history and legacy, the 10 Million Names Project is a moonshot endeavor that aims to use the power of ancestry research to identify the names of the 10 million men, women, and children who were enslaved in the territory that became the United States.
10 million. 10 million. And one thing I learned is 10 million enslaved Black people. They say there were millions that were not enslaved. We're gonna talk about that.
Goal is to put names and faces on this vital history, not only to give the enslaved the dignity they deserve, but to connect those living today with their family story. With the help of the 10 Million Names genealogist, we were able to find the direct descendants of Celia Black. In Rhode Island, we met 68-year-old Curtis Royal, who spent time with her as a young man.
She's my great-grandmother from my mother's side of the family.
Do you remember any of the stories that she would tell?
She told us about how difficult it was, just being alive during that period. And of course, she would tell us a story about the big ox that they had 2 of them, and how her father would set her right on the head of the ox, and she would just hold on with the horns. So those are, as a boy, those are fascinating. You say, wow.
My grandfather had some big old oxen. He had one that was big with wide horns. Oh, it looked like a house.
Man, them things are huge. I didn't even know they had used oxes back then. Oxes, cows, I guess they all do the same. But man, them things, that's old school pig right there.
Wide horns. And I used to sit up there and clean them horns. And then his name was Coley. And the other one was named Left.
Was it ever difficult to talk about slavery?
Yes, and I think what made it so difficult is just realizing, how emotional it was and what they went through. You try to put yourself into their physical being and to understand what they went through, and it's. Oof.
And that's the problem that I feel like other races, even black people, don't understand. We got to put ourselves in their shoes and understand what they went through. They always say get over something. How can you get when you experience trauma and years and years, hundreds of years of trauma and abuse, and we can go on and on what went on during slavery, but how can you tell people to forget about that? And then sometimes, like he said, it's hard to talk about that because there's a lot of things embedded in your memory that you can never ever forget. That's an experience that a lot of people never experienced in their life, including myself.
It is scary.
You've heard the recording
Yes.
of your great-grandmother
Yes.
in 1974.
It was very challenging for me to hear when they asked her the question about what it was like working in the fields, the heat in Texas, the humidity, and sometimes 105, 110 degrees, and I just can't fathom waking up, sun up to sundown, working in the fields.
Yeah, I can't either. Sun up and sundown, like I said in the beginning. That's how it was in slavery. That's how much labor they got out of you. Sun up to sundown. And they don't even talk about breaks. We go to work, we get a 15-minute break, a lunch break. I don't even think they got a break. Maybe, some water or something, but they had to go back to work.
How did they do it? How did they do it?
You learn about slavery in America. I think especially being a Black American, the initial emotion is anger.
There's the history of slavery as an institution, which was all about oppressing people. And that's a very dark history that I think should make us angry. But then there's an African-American history of survival through and beyond that institution. And that's kind of amazing. To hear people, accepting that I lived this life, it was incredibly hard, and I'm still here.
And that's the key. That's what's driving me to go back to learn. Because I don't ever want to forget what they've been through. What they did to pave a way for us, the future. Like they had it hard. They had it hard physically and mentally. I think nowadays we have it only hard mentally. They helped us get over that physical part. Now it's up to us who are in the present and in the future to break that curse.
And that I've survived, and I've got children, and I've passed on some kind of legacy.
How does who's conducting these interviews and how they're conducting these interviews, how does that matter?
Oh, I mean, it's enormously important. For the WPA interviews in general, the vast majority are white interviewers. Some are the children of the former slave owners, in fact, that are interviewing a former slave, right, of that same family.
But everywhere, slavery was a system for allocating status. And slaves and ex-slaves were supposed to be low status people. And so when they were talking to people who they perceived to be of higher status, they had to be very careful about what they said, right? Because those people could determine their fate.
While many of the audio recordings don't reflect it, slaves were frequently
Now, I'm going to pause on that because I just want all my viewers to just look at that. I've seen it before floating on the internet, and I just couldn't really look at it, but let's all look at it. Like, what could he possibly done to deserve that? Like, what could we have done back then that would deserve that? What, run away? Or talk back? Or eat some extra food? Or took a break? Or drunk some water? It's just like, what? This is what drives me to keep searching, to keep getting in tune with my roots. Because we can never forget where our people, our ancestors, went through. Look at that.
subjected to heinous forms of abuse, including beatings, sexual assault, and forms of torture. The historic 10 Million Names Project, in which ABC News is the exclusive media partner, is an ancestry database that the public can access, add information to, and use as a research tool. And because so little information about enslaved people was officially documented, amassing this data is a huge task.
We encourage anyone that wants to get involved to reach out, to go to the website, and to be part of that project.
Who stands the most to gain from hearing these? I mean, is it Black folk? Is it younger Black folk? Is it white America? Is it Americans as a whole?
I think everybody benefits from listening to these tapes and these recordings. Everybody that want to listen, because you can't force nobody to listen. But a lot of people say it didn't happen. I've seen videos online where they say slavery never happened, because everybody that supposedly went through slavery or had slaves died off. So there's no proof that it happened. But these recordings are proof.
If we're going to understand anything about freedom, then we're going to have to understand the people who were denied that freedom.
While very few of us will have the opportunity of hearing our ancestors' voices on tape, the 10 Million Names Project hopes that one day all Black Americans will have the chance to know their ancestors' names and stories the way that Curtis knows Celia.
You had the chance to know your great-grandmother.
Yes.
How powerful is it being able to connect that dot?
It's extremely powerful. You got to hear it from her directly.
And I like the way he said it. You got to hear from her. And that's the key. Hearing it from them. It goes a long way. Because it makes you believe that what they've been through was real. And our people are strong.
Not something that was passed on, but to hear it directly from her. Her pain.
Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments how you feel about them having audio tapes. Is it too late? Does it matter? And who does it benefit? Let me know in the comments.